Bonjour mes amis et bienvenue aux prochaines leçons de français premier, français débutant, français 1. Aujourd'hui, nous allons regarder les dernières sortes de verbes réguliers, les verbes R, E et IR. After today, you will know how to conjugate all the regular verbs in the French language, which, hey, comprises about 90% of all French verbs. So it's going to be pretty easy for you to communicate with any verb you want after today. So let's get started. Vitement, quickly, right before we get into the new verbs, just a reminder, how to conjugate an ER verb. Well, we know there's two steps. One, you cut off the ER and then you add on the appropriate ending. For je, that is E. For tu, that is ES. Il, elle, or on, that is E. Nous, ONS. Vous, EZ. And il and L with a silent ENT. So if you know how to conjugate an ER verb, you're going to see a lot of similarities with what we're looking at today. So it's great that you already mastered it. So first we're going to look at RE verbs. Now, the first thing that's interesting about RE verbs is even though it's a regular verb form, it only comprises about 3 to 5% of the French verbs that are out there. So we're not actually going to be using this conjugation very much, but it's still an important one to know because you're going to see patterns that are similar to this with verbs that we're going to learn. So just like ER verbs, first we cut off the RE from the end of it. So the infinitive or the activity form is always going to end with an RE, and then we're going to cut it off. You should always be left with something that has a D. If it does not have a D, it's an irregular verb. That's a clue, so you know don't conjugate it like a regular RE verb. But after we've cut off the RE and we're left with something that ends with a D, then we add our endings. For je, we add an S. Tu, we add an S. Il, elle, and on, we add nothing. So there's no additional ending. So that verb should just end with a D. Nous, ONS, vous, easy, il and elle, silent, ENT. Notice how it's similar to ER verbs. So when we conjugate an RE verb like vendre, which means to sell, I cut off the RE and I add my appropriate ending. So I have je vends for I sell, tu vends for he sells, you sell, excuse me. Il vend, elle vend, on vend, he sells or she sells. Nous vendons, we sell. Vous vendez, you all sell. Ils vendent. Remember, ENT is silent when it's a verb. So when we conjugate an RE verb correctly, this is how it should look. You're going to be making a verb fold for this if you haven't already, so I encourage you to use this as your example. Now we're going to look at how to conjugate an IR verb. These are much more common than RE verbs, and their conjugations are a little more complicated, as you can see. But the process is still the same as it was for RE and ER. First, we're going to cut off the IR at the end of the verb, and you're going to need anything that is left. Pay attention to spelling. IR verbs are notorious for making spelling mistakes when they are conjugated, so you're going to want to pay attention. After we have our verb stem from cutting off the IR, we add in our endings. For je, we're going to add an IS. For tu, we're going to add an IS. For il and elle and on, we're going to add an IT. For nous, we're going to add an ISSONS, all 6 letters. For vous, ISSEZ, with the 5 letters. And for il and elle, plural, ISSENT. So you are going to use a lot of different letters on this one. So make sure you're paying attention to how you conjugate. Again, you're going to make a verb fold. I encourage you to use the next verb we're going to look at as your example. Finir, to finish. A perfect example of a regular IR verb. So you notice I have the conjugations there. So I cut off the IR and I add IS, ISIT, ISSONS, ISSEZ, ISSENT. So we have je finis for I finish, tu finis for you finish, il finit, elle finit, on finit for he finishes or she finishes. Nous finissons, notice how I'm pronouncing ils sont. Nous finissons for we are finishing. Vous finissez or you all are finishing. Ils finissent, again, silent ENT. Elles finissent, again, silent ENT. But you are going to hear that is. Here we have a list of common RE and IR verbs that I like for you to at least have some awareness of. Entendre, to hear. Perdre, to lose. Répondre à, to respond to. Vendre, to sell, like we already looked at. Rendre visite, to pay a visit to. You'll notice with répondre à and rendre visite à, you notice there's an à. We always have to use that when we're going to use those verbs. So answer to or pay a visit to someone or to visit someone. And notice it's someone, not a thing. It's got to be, typically you're going to use rendre visite when you're going to pay a visit to a person. So, je rends visite à ma grand-mère. Je rends visite à mon cousin, etc. Okay, and you also notice that these are all regular RE verbs because they end in DRE. That's how you can always tell it's a regular RE verb, because a lot of irregular verbs end with RE, but this is how you can tell whether it is or isn't. On the other side, IR verbs. Finir, to finish. Choisir, to choose. Grossir, to get fat. Maigrir, to get skinny. Réussir, to succeed. Obéir, to obey. These are all regular IR verbs, and I want to point out choisir, grossir, and réussir. When we conjugate choisir, a lot of people will fall for the trap of they cut off IR, and then they just see an IS, so they think they're done. Nope. So it should be je choisis, CHOIS, Or with grossir, there's two S's, and then if we're going to put the new form, we still got to put ISS. So nous grossissons, GROSSISSONS. It's like you're spelling Mississippi. Same thing with réussir, nous réussissons. Excuse me, wrong one. Nous réussissons. I used the wrong tense there. So it would be REUSSISSONS. So make sure you're paying attention to your spelling when you're using these verbs. Now, just to help you out, with RE verbs, there's a little bit of a song to help you remember the endings. It goes like this. SS nothing, SS nothing, ONS, ONS, easy and ENT, easy and ENT, that's RE, that's RE. Ta-da. Uses the tone of Frère Jacques, which is a sort of a children's French song. Now, IR verbs, the way to remember the endings for IR verbs is something of a little chant. IS, IS, IT, ISSONS, ISSEZ, ISSENT. So I hope that helps you remember it, but we're going to move on. So, last part, c'est à toi. Now it's you. I gave you two new verbs, descendre, regular RE verb, and grandir, regular IR verb. Pause the video if you wouldn't mind, and I want you to conjugate each of them on your own, and we're going to see if you get it right. So pause the video, please. Okay, let's see if you were correct. Take a look at your conjugations and compare them to ours. Je descends, tu descends, il, elle, on descend, nous descendons, vous descendez, il, elle descendent. Did you do it correctly? I'm sure you did. Grandir, je grandis, tu grandis, il, elle, on grandit, nous grandissons, vous grandissez, il, elle grandissent. Did you conjugate it correctly? I bet you did. Okay, so now that you know how to use an IR and RE verb correctly, make sure that you had a chance to create a verb fold practicing with these verb conjugations. Make sure you pick out an example verb to conjugate in it. A bientôt!